DM me was like, "Carl, what do you think about it?" And I'm like, you know what? Let me ask my panel. Apparently, they told him if he didn't bench him, like if he didn't stop playing, like he would have got a pay cut. That's out there. What are your guys' thoughts on it? What have you heard about it? Are we holding Payton accountable, Sean Payton accountable for his actions? Rick, let me start with you. What do you think?
So my first thought, right? And the first thing I'm going to say is these are the types of situations we have to remember when guys are outperforming contracts and holding out, when guys are in situations in a city or a franchise or an organization that they no longer want to be in, whether it be personally, spiritually, professionally, and ask for trades. When guys become, and let me not, I say guys in general, obviously girls too, ladies too, when players become free agents and want to do the tours and go check out all these different places and we call them this and we call them that, and like, why don't you just pick a place? Every time stuff like that happens, like, these are the types of situations we have to remember, because at the end of the day, it is a business. It is a business on both ends of the spectrum. Everybody is in this to make sure that they are benefiting as best as they can from this business. That's what we're seeing here in an ugly manner from an organization, right? So to be in a situation where, sure, they start off rough, you have the stink of that 70-point game, from the Dolphins attached to you. You start to turn things around. You start looking good. You start playing respectably. You start winning some really big games, stringing them together. And then to know that through all of that, as an organization, you in the back looking at the books like, yeah, this is cool and all, 5-6 games in a row. Yeah, that's awesome. Well, we might be able to get into the playoffs. Yeah, that's cool. But if this dude gets hurt, we got to give him 37 million next year. So all of this is cool, but I ain't trying to have this guy get hurt and have to give him 37 million next year. Right? So at the end of the day, it's a business decision, and I get it. For me, I can't fault anybody involved because, again, as a businessman myself, as a professional myself, I can acknowledge the fact that when you're in business relationships, none of this is personal. When you're in business relationships, you have to try to do what is best for you within that negotiation, within that situation, whatever the case may be. Everybody is trying to get the best deal for themselves. And right now, Denver's looking at the sheet and they're thinking, man, the best deal for us is to make sure this guy doesn't get hurt, so we don't have to pay him an extra 37 million next year. And if we could break away from him, whatever, that makes sense. Who I feel bad for are the fans of the Denver Broncos, okay? Because we clown fans a lot. We take sides of fans a lot. We poke fun at them. We do a lot of things as it comes to the fans and whatnot. But again, for me, if I'm a fan and I'm seeing the way my team had been playing for that stretch, and now to find out that during that stretch, the team that I'm a fan of, the leaders of that team are trying to tell this guy, yo, either take this 37 million off the contract or I'm going to bench you. I don't care what's happening out there on the field. I'm going to bench you because I don't want to lose that money. As a fan, that would bother me, So all the Denver fans out there, shout out to y'all. This is trash. To be a fan of an organization that is going to look at the books this way, in such a black and white matter. We know it's always about the books. I know that. But you can't have a guy in the process of a winning streak, potentially turning a season around, looking at the odds of possibly getting you into the playoffs, and you're worried about the bottom line. That's trash, man. I don't like the situation at all. I get it. I understand it, but it's horrible.
Manny, what are your thoughts here? Do you agree with Rick?
No. I'm enjoying all this energy that's happening within the pony thing. Come on, bro. Like,
we forget who it is. Yeah,
I seen it coming. I seen it coming.
I mean, come on. You really expect me to say something nice about it? I love it. Yo, you know what? I hope the Raiders somehow take out this quarterback, Jarrett Stidham, ex-Raider quarterback, by the way, ex-backup. Hope we get him down and then have Russell Wilson get back on. And we hurt his ankle, and then he fails physical, and they got to pay him his money. At the end of the day, from what I see, if you want me to take the unbiased part, to be unbiased,
are you capable of that?
The ponies are the ones that made this deal to get him. Don't forget, they traded for him. They gave him all this money. You made this decision. Then you go and get a coach. He comes in here ruling like he's a dictator or something. And shout out to Ryan Clark for what he said. On Get Up, he said that Sean Payton came out here like a thug. Like the man said, "Oh, we're not going to do this." He threw Russell Wilson under the bus in his first presser before the off season or anything like that. So it's like, yo, you really don't give a shit about your quarterback. You saying all this, but you're a bit of a hypocrite because you did the exact same thing. You didn't do this when you had Drew Brees in New Orleans. Don't forget. Let's also not forget the controversy that Sean Payton was a part of with the bounty gate. We don't forget that history right away. So he comes in here, does all of this. They start losing games at the beginning of the season, then they start turning it around. And obviously it's because Russell Wilson is actually the one stepping up. So your quarterback is doing exactly what you need him to do. Yet now you're mad at the deal you guys made earlier, and now you want him to just go renege on that? Like, no, that's not how it works. Like Rick said, he's a businessman. He understands the whole thing. When you sign a contract with your employer or anything like that, and they say, "Oh, if you don't make any calls or get written up within a year or two, and then that passes, you get like a $20K bonus or something like that." Again, hypothetical. And it comes to the second year and you finally pass that part, you never got written up or anything, they got to give you that $20K because that's what you signed in the contract. But they'll try to find some type of way to try to prevent that from occurring. And that's what the ponies are doing right now. So guess what? They shot themselves in the foot with this one. And I'm going to continue to enjoy this because I'm going to see them next week. So,
Travis, you're all about players getting paid. And this kind of, goes against that with a player who's getting paid. And all of a sudden he's not going to get it because he's not playing. Will this now change contract structures in the NFL about how players, I guess?
No, because the players aren't willing to do what it takes to get that type of leverage. This is why when those CBA negotiations go on and the players don't hold out for the things that they need to have, you end up in situations like this. You got to kind of examine this a little bit from it's not as black as white as we want to paint it out to be. Yes, the Broncos organization gave Russell Wilson his contract, but at the time that was somewhat of a different regime. It's the same GM, but it's a different structure at this point, because last year it was the GM, who was basically running the organization, but this year you brought in Sean Payton, whose job was to basically change the culture around there, because the culture was in a bad place. I mean, he came in there, Russell Wilson is such a polarizing player, and I find it interesting how the sway of public, sympathy has now shifted to Russell, because last year we was all on Russell. We know Russell has that reputation of being, what is it, inauthentic, whatever it is. So now, public opinion is on Russell's side, and I just find that interesting, because Sean Payton's job was to come in there and, put things in order, because the things had got kind of out of whack last season. You got Russell Wilson with his own private office. You got I'm not going to, crap on the coach like Sean Payton did, but it wasn't exactly the best coaching job, with Nathaniel Hackett. So Sean Payton was coming there to, set the ship, set the ship right. You know what I mean? So he came in there, and I don't think it hasn't been necessarily, I don't think these two mesh well together. I think that's what it is at the end of the day, because you would think from an offensive standpoint, it would have been a good fit from the way, if you look at what Sean Payton liked to do, in the early New Orleans days when Drew Brees was in his prime, they like to push the ball down the field. And what is one thing Russell Wilson actually did well? Russell Wilson actually throws a good deep ball. Like, he's probably one of the better deep ball passers in the NFL. So you thought it would have been a good fit. I just don't think these two have meshed well for whatever reason it is. I mean, remember there was the comments where, he told Russell, need you to stop, kissing babies and be a football player. Because Russell Wilson does have a tendency to kind of be, very politician, presidential-like. You know what I mean? So I just don't think these two have been a good mesh. And the Broncos they're in a situation where they didn't want to be tied to him long-term because they don't think he's the long-term answer. So we see why they did this, because if he gets injured, now you're stuck with him in those guarantees. So it seems like the Broncos are willing to, you know, Russell will probably be there next year. If you know what I mean, probably. But the year after that, he's probably gone. So they're trying to, because if you look at it technically, the extension technically hasn't started yet. Because he had like 2 more years left on his deal. I think the extension starts next season, technically. You know what I mean? But the way they work all that out with the contract.
It's a 5-year, right?
Yes, I believe it's a 5-year extension. So they're trying to get from out of this because they don't think that he's the long-term. If you look at the way the Broncos have been moving all season, they've been kind of cleaning house.
Yep.
They got rid of a lot of players that they brought in over the last 2 years. Sean Payton is ready to clean this thing from the bottom, clean this thing out, and start from scratch, which is interesting because they don't have a lot of draft picks simply because of the picks they gave up to get Russell Wilson and Sean Payton. So they're kind of end of a bind there from a draft standpoint. So it's interesting to see how they plan on rebuilding this team because they see that this team is not in a place where Russell Wilson can lead this team. You know what I mean? He can take this team over the hump. You know what I mean? I like to make that comparison of their quarterbacks who are tractor trailers and their quarterbacks who are getting pulled. You know what I mean? And I don't think Sean Payton thinks that Russell Wilson is a tractor trailer at this point. He thinks Russell Wilson probably needs a lot more help to make, you know what I mean, to make this team great. And they're not in a position to do that. Because when you pay your quarterback that high price, you can't pay everybody else. You know what I mean? So I think Sean Payton has really looked at this team and said, this team needs a lot more work than, you know what I mean, than just the quarterback situation. And if we're strapped to a quarterback who can't get us over that hump, we're kind of stuck in, you know, quarterback limbo. You know what I mean? Where you're stuck in that teen range of the draft picks. You know, you're not bad enough to draft a quarterback and completely rebuild, but you're not good enough to win a Super Bowl. You know what I mean? So it's a very difficult situation.
I have the draft pick.
What happened?
I had the list of the entire trade. It's insane.
Right, they gave like between Russell Wilson and Sean Payton, they gave up a ridiculous amount of draft picks. So they don't have a lot of draft picks over the 5.
It was 5. It was the 2022 first round, 2022 second round, 5th round pick, and then 2023 first round and second round. So they ended up, and don't forget, they got Drew Lock, Noah Fant, and Shelby Harris, the defensive lineman. So they got 8 players in total, and the Broncos got Russell Wilson and defensive lineman Uwazurike, who was the 2022 4th round pick.
So it's a very odd situation. Like I said, I was surprised that Russell Wilson came out and confirmed it. That was very not like Russell.
Well, he had to.
I was gonna say, yeah. Why?
You got to protect yourself.
Did he?
No, you did. You got to cover.
Yeah, but then what?
He ends up
being Neo in the Matrix, trying to dodge bullets and dodge questions.
And you know what, Travis? It goes back to the point about you saying how they've been smearing his name since last year. Like, you got to stand up for yourself at the end of the day.
Yeah,
right. But
real.
But
if we're gonna do this, keep it real.
Yeah.
If you look at the history of Russell Wilson, that's not very him. So but at the same time, that's what surprised me. It's like,
but it's like, how many more punches can you take? Like, fans are getting
I agree with that. I'm not saying it was wrong. I'm not saying it was wrong. I'm just saying I was surprised because, like we said, Russell Wilson has a tendency to be very politician and presidential like, you know what I mean? But he actually came out and said, yeah, he gave the full story, and I was
Sierra
like,
guy in his back. That's what happened. Sierra guy in his back.
And not only that too, in the same light, I think this is still very politician-ish and in his defense. I think this is what you do have to do, even with that stigma that he has about kind of not necessarily being a guy that you would expect to come out and confirm stuff like this. He knows that if he doesn't, it's just going to keep kicking up. He's already seen, we all know who Sean Payton is and how he can spin the media. So if you're Russell Wilson, do you sit back and say, hey, I'm not going to jump into this and mention anything and this and that? And not only now you're quiet, your side is not being mentioned, but you know the guy on the other side is a master at getting in front of that camera and in front of those microphones and saying all types of God knows what. You may as well jump out in front of it right now, take the target off of you. And now, like we mentioned at the beginning of the conversation, reshift the public sentiment back to you. You have an opportunity to step up, and now you become the victim. So all of the Broncos country let's ride videos and jokes from last year, people are now saying, hey, this guy was riding for you hardcore, and this is how you're going to play him. You know what I'm saying? So I think it's a very pretty good calculated move on his defense. One last thing I'll say about Sean Payton, right? Let's not step up here and act like this ain't the same man who gave Taysom Hill all that money, right? So,
Right.
so for us to be out here talking about Sean Payton, looking at this and looking at that and saying he can't do it this and can't do it that, and I need to have this and I need to have that. That man gave Taysom Hill a crap ton of money that's got New Orleans handcuffed still right now. So, I mean, his track record ain't really the greatest when it comes to handing out these contracts either.
Thanks for watching the Sports Hit List. Be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe. In fact, do it now.